Gotta be with movement.
And welcome to today's stream, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.
I'll just do it loosely.
We're doing the Endless Engines competition entry. So picking up where we left off in a previous video.
And now I can tab into it, select this edge,
and mock-up animation done using the help of AI.
Okay, so that's going to determine where the water starts off at and where the land
so I'm trying a new setup.
So we might have the water
had that happen
just a little bit.
I see.
I suppose we want to do that in reverse. We want to have this be
water.
water
For that. If there's any other issues with the
so we'll drop this a little bit
and please
we'll
let me know.
Back into the top view and just shift this over to be our land.
You might need to
moving it from this view
as well. So
I keep clipping because
we have this animation that was generated before.
Clip end here. This
and
file
it was
is
done with
huge,
the help of AI.
So go ahead and give myself.
And the whole point here was to really
distance.
just be able to get a sense for what the scene could look like before we actually got
Zoom
into
back in on
modeling and doing things more specific.
There we go. And
to
hit
this
GY,
animation.
turn off my snapping.
So
it's totally messing up how I'm moving this
with
around.
that, we're going to get right into that file.
And we have that
Blender
surface right there.
And we're going to use a little bit of inspiration from our mood board. So thanks for tuning in.
Move it up it's
Let your friends know. I see you there in the chat. EM.
If I go
thanks
back, this is actually lower, so the car would actually end up being lower through this part of the sequence. If I can start mocking that up too, if the car is tied to this empty, which it is not.
And that's what we're going for here, building this out together.
Car is tied to this right here.
Whether you're just doing it.
And it's got some keyframes already throughout its whole position.
Tips or tricks, or if you want to do some
So what I might want to do is right here,
highly recommended.
Bring this car down.
Anywho, we talk about what aesthetic we're going to use here.
We've clear out just the Z.
Dark
so I'll right click here on Z and I'll just clear keyframes.
So a nighttime scene, something that has some glowing lights, but then on the other hand we have this daytime scene. So these are actually two different sequences.
Single keyframe.
And even though I use this sort of aesthetic for the AI
the position of the car isn't.
We're actually going to go for our competition entry with.
What basically I want to be able to have here in the beginning is more open water and a city blocked out way far out in the background. So to get started on that,
if we look here,
kind of taking on from the inspiration image here on the left, right? Sort of this. We could have some top.
Oh, perfect. Thanks. One of the things I overlooked with the microphones, with the new setup. So thanks for catching that. We'll have to go back and subtitle that. See if I can clean that up. And let me know if this is better. It should be. So for a test, if we're talking about creating a scene that sort of looks like this, my idea is to basically have this happening at the ground level. And then above this, we have this sort of next level futuristic container sort of city. Awesome. Thanks for letting me know. I'm glad that sound is working better. Anything else that you might catch, let me know. I'll see if I can resolve it quickly. Hopefully we can get it done. All right. So these are our photo references. We're going to start building off of this photo in Blender. The way we're going to do that is I've already saved this as a new file. We can take a look at how our rendered view is looking. So we have not something that's like the animation that we saw earlier because we do that AI pass at the end. I don't think I'm going to do that for this competition entry. What we're looking at here is the bare bones file. And we can see that the animation plays. We have about 120 frames here to work with. Yep, 120. So we have the car cutting in. And then we have it bursting through a gate after having gotten onto land from the water and then passing through. And here we see, so this bottom level is where I want to build out this sort of old city type of Venice environment. And all these towers here are going to be structures that are going to be holding up the type of container things that we see over here, right? Like these dystopic looking pipe towers. So yeah, let's get into it. We're going to only work on the environment in this case, but to get started with this, I'm actually going to open up a fresh Blender file to be able to work on this building module. What I'm going to do is I'm basically going to take this street corner scene and use that building as reference to start building out what could be, you know, one of the buildings at the bottom, and from there create variations. And there's a really interesting technique to doing this that primes for another part of Blender. but I'll get into that in just a bit. First, we'll bring in an image as a plane, and I will fish out that photo from my files. See, we have a lot to work with here. There it is. Get rid of our default cube always. Look straight on at the image here, and in material preview, we can see the photo. Okay. Now, there's a really cool way of going about this, which is first to use perspective plotter to start getting some of that detail done, as these different elements that we want to extrude off of the building, and use the actual photo as a texture, because it'll look, since it's the background that we're working with, we don't actually need anything photoreal or anything high quality. We can just work with our photo applied as a texture on a model that has a moderate amount of detail. So I'm going to open up the perspective plotter by going to my camera view, or actually setting my camera view to be this right here, looking straight on at this photo. So from there, we can now, with the camera selected, open our perspective plotter here by tapping N and opening that sidebar. And we go plot perspective. Just kidding. We need to first select a photo. So we go to the camera and we go to background images. We apply that. We hit add image. And since we already brought in the image, I'm going to go ahead and select it from this list. And we shouldn't be able to hide now the plane that we brought in. I just like to keep that as a backup. But now that our image is in this file, we can now go through the perspective plotter. So we can do first here for background unmatched. So now it automatically changed the size of the render to fit the photo. Then we'll go to plot perspective and we get 2 vanishing points. So this is a pretty flat photo. We're going to bring these green lines over here down. And this top one, we want to apply somewhere else that we can match. This is actually the ground plane one, it seems. The ground plane can move later. I'll just worry about lining up these lines to the edges of this building and then doing the same thing for the red. And it's better to use the same height angle right there. If I lower the opacity of the image real quick, as I fix my perspective over here a little bit, select the camera, go over here, and under opacity, let's turn that down. We see there we have the 2 sets of lines, and then this white dot over here actually sets our ground plane. So I'm not sure if you're able to see this on stream if I lower the opacity all the way and perhaps introduce a cube into the mix. If I move these lines, the perspective at which the camera looks at this cube changes a little bit. So selecting the camera and bringing back my scene, this allows me to start building 3D on top of my scene. So if I make this cube match that corner right there, right, we should see the edges of the cube are matching the edges of the building. So I already have a cube for that set. I could hit duplicate and then extrude on, or move on the Y, and then G to move and move it on the X and push it back. And if I stick to my wireframe view, I can line up these, well, I don't know why I added another cube. Oh, you're right, because we have this little inside corner. So I just have to bring this cube over this way and just line up that corner right there. I can tab into it and I can select this top surface. This is where having our 2 views, as usual, helps. We can see the camera perspective there, and we can see the 3D scene here. And go into face mode, select this one here, and just move it up to meet right there. And I can keep this going with just one single volume, right? So because this is the background of the whole scene that we're generating, we're just working with, where's the video at? Oh, I closed it. Anywho, I have the other file. Since we're working with these buildings that are all set up in the background, we don't want really high detail models. The high detail is going to be the vehicle and the street and the foreground, the other things that are moving with the vehicle. That's where we want to orient all our resources on the computer towards. So the more efficient we can be with these things that are hanging out in the background, the better it's just going to be overall at getting this done in time. And also, you just don't notice all that extra quality, because since we're working with photographs here to get some details out, those photographs already come embedded with a lot of detail imperfections, right? So all this ultimately makes it up into the camera. With that being said, I can just use these cubes to build out this entire volume. So by selecting these two, I can go over here to modifier, boolean, and do a boolean union, right? Whichever one I apply that to. So I applied it over to this one. And then the object I want to boolean into is this other one here. So I can just hit the eyedropper, select that one there. Now if I hide this second cube, this first cube should look like that two together. So I'd apply this drop down menu for apply, or Control A to apply the modifier. And if I tab into it now, I have extra faces to work with, right? So I kind of messed up here with the heights, but that's okay. I can just select this top face over here and hit GZ, bring that down, or even better, if I were to turn on snapping. So I can turn on snapping up here and snap to face project. So if I hit GZ and I just hover over this face over here, it's basically just snapping onto anywhere on this plane. And there we go. We have them sitting at the same height. So how do we continue adding detail in a way that's low poly and efficient? Well, the same way I'd build this building out, right? I could select these, duplicate them, hit escape, and then hit scale, or do it more evenly. That would work if it were just one cube. Since we have two cubes here, I want to use inset faces. And then with insetting the face, if I just let go, I get this menu over here on the bottom left, and I see the thickness that I applied. If I play a negative number, oh, doesn't allow us. If we are able to outset, there we go. So by setting it to outset, it's going outwards, or lower actually. That's all right, I can work with that. If I bring it down to there, go to my side view and basically just select this band of faces that I just created and move it up so that it meets that white section on the building. I could tweak these edges and these corners so that it meets a little better, right? In 3D we have a perfect 90, but perfect 90s don't exist in the real world, especially when these buildings have so many years on them. I'm going to turn off my snapping so I can move this freely on the Z-axis. So I have my edges right here snapping to the white trim. All right. So with those lines set up, we see here the shape is looking pretty spot on there. And we can start seeing how this works in 3D just by going to Material Preview. Gotta save my file. Ooh. Always remember to save your file. I kind of just do it by reflex. I'm like, what happened? The window just popped open. Oh yeah, that's right. I did that. So now with that saved, we can start adding some load into the computer by throwing that image onto this object overall. So we create a new material for it right here on the right with the object selected. We hit new material slot, and we can, there we go, new material. I don't know why it's not assigning. There we go. Material 1. We can rename it Building 1, since we're just going to use that one photo, and then we can start bricking it off of this one, but that way we can identify it very easily, and when we make duplicates, we can be more specific about our texture names. But we can just do it right here. We don't have to open our node editor this time around. We can just go to base color, at least not for now. We can go to image texture, and then we just again select that image that we set. And it looks kind of funky on the view over here. That's because we got to edit into it or go into edit mode by hitting tab, and then A to select all our faces, U, and we do an unwrap, and then you select the correct one, which is project from view. So by projecting from view, it's basically throwing that image onto the cube. Very nice. So this is where it starts to get a little weird. I did this in a previous video, and this works really well when you're just going to stick to the camera view, right? Everything looks correct. But as you start extruding faces around and you start adding more and more objects to have to apply this perspective to, and you keep reprojecting that texture onto the geometry, the more distorted and warped things get. The better it looks from the camera, but as soon as you move out of the camera view, it starts to look really bad, really wonky. So, as I mentioned earlier, something that we could start doing now is start setting ourselves up for procedural modeling. This is not something I've fully worked out yet, although you can buy scripts already done by people. When I mean scripts, it's like, this is something I went over last time, is the plugin ByGen, just to quickly show. I call them scripts because of my experience previously in Grasshopper, that's what we would call them, but here they're called geometry modifiers or geometry nodes. So we go to ByGen, and this is basically what geometry nodes do. If I apply it to the selected, it looks like it's gone, but if I play through as an animation, it generates in. So this works through geometry nodes. If I go over to the geometry node section, lost my mouse, there we go. I select this object, and or maybe this one's just a stack of modifiers. Some of these from this plugin are just modifiers. If I apply another one, there we go. This monkey diamond looking thing where if I move this, the diamonds kind of move around on the face of it. So this is a, whoa, sorry. This is a geometry node setup right here, which determines a lot of things. Like right here, I can change the minimum and maximum size of the crystals or their frequency. So there's basically a behavior for geometries set up. How is this relevant to the building that we're doing? Well, there are scripts out there or geometry node setups that you can do that procedurally generate buildings from having smaller blocks of the building modeled. So what you do is you set up a cube to represent a module. By that, I mean we set up a module for the corner of the building. We set up a module for a second story corner. We set up a module for a middle arch on the second story, a module for one on the bottom, and so on and so forth. So you could basically designate a size thing to a building, and it'll just reapply that all those geometries in whatever size it needs to. So that's kind of how we're going to do it here, except it's going to be analog. It's not going to be automated. We're going to kind of set up how it is that we want these cubes to contain in geometry. So something that I can make good use of here is this corner right here where this guy is kindly in our way. I can right here, just using this face, start to copy or emulate what we have going on in this corner, including the balcony and the vegetation and so on. And I can actually ultimately choose to use other assets to go above and replace that. Or I can also Photoshop the image later on to get rid of the guy. And I don't really have to do much because I already used the photo to build out the whole 3D scene. So if I were to then Photoshop this image, it would automatically update to the 3D scene. Anywho, that's enough talk. We will go here into we'll go back to our camera view. We'll make sure that we're building things out appropriately using wireframe view. But we're actually going to work on this smaller screen. We can check in with ourselves right there. And on this other screen, we'll go into solid view. And we'll view this in material preview mode. Add a new cube. Have it placed to meet that corner right there, and do whatever needs to be done here. We're gonna move it into view. I'm confused why. I think because I have it on. There we go. We're going to move it in front of the building. We're more or less matching where the building is in 3D. We can actually use our vertex snapping mode to make it meet right there. So we'll turn on snapping again, and we'll switch that over to vertex. And by hitting G to move it from this corner right here, I can have it snap to that corner right there. So now that's completely on top of each other. However, it's not very useful to start working on this cube. So I'll actually go over into object properties, viewport display, and set it to wireframe. Display as wire. There we go. Two places, show wireframe and display as wire. So when we have that there, we can now, while seeing the image and in face mode, we can start moving what we need to move around in order to get it to match. So we can select this side face and move it in the x-axis. So we have it meet that edge right there. We can select this face here, and I have to pick a cutoff point for that corner. So I'll do it, I mean, it's pretty fine there. Actually, I'll just leave that where it is. Just have it meet the corner and then having it meet the edge right there. But I want to meet it in perspective, right? There's a good reason for that moving forward. Anywho, I can now just work within this one cube. I can do Control R to add loop cuts. So I can make sure that I get the window frame now. You want to go in order of what the most important aspects are. It's actually the most important in terms of simplest and largest influence over the 3D object is this band right here. So I'll set up that band right there. We have the curb creeping in. So I do want actually a floor condition if these cubes are meeting anywhere near the floor. Now I can just start pushing things out. So I can select these faces down here. Extrude. And this is where it comes in handy to have this other view. So I can meet it with that corner right there. Oops. Should have locked in my axis. So there we go. Then we Control R again. We just start adding the windowsill on all sides. And if the image is a little distorted, you just want to continue to reference the same area. And there we go. I'm going to turn off my... There we go. Okay, so if we see this, we have all our cuts set up here. We can start selecting these faces in perspective. So if we see right here, we have the glass of the window. We want to push that in. So I'll hit E and then push that through. Go back to my view right here. I can see in wireframe how far back I'm supposed to go for the glass. And we can select our windowsill. Ooh, that went in the wrong axis. Undo that. Okay, extrude. There we go. Push that back to where in the photo the glass meets the window marquee. Now we go with the window marquee. We extrude that out. Gonna have to move some edges. Oh, no, meeting the top there. And I'm meeting the top there, except that's behind the leaves. So that's fine. We'll save. Now, to this object, I can hit Tab, and then from this view, hit A, U, project from view. We can start to see how this is working out. I gotta go over here and turn it back to textured and apply that same material that has the building. There we go. So now I have one module of the building. Yes, I have to get rid of the guy. But I can quickly now, by having just different sections selected and extruded out, or even before extruding, if I set a different material on this first, so I could use a plugin such as, I'll go to my trusty handy real-time materials by Ducky 3D and go to our basics, and under basics there's a cement one here. I can add that material. Oops, don't just add that material. You got to add a new material slot first. So we go over here to the right and hit plus, and then with this new slot we want to hit assign, so we assign that slot to that row right there. Now we can go to our basics, basic cement, add material, and then extrude it out. The pesky edges should have brought out with that same material, but that's all right. I can just select through these faces and assign the cement material to it as well. Now I want to get rid of the guy, so I'll bring in some bricks. That's the window marquee. Do we have bricks with you? Let's see, where would it be? I think it's under practical. Yeah, we got some bricks. We can just add that. Again, don't just add it. Add a new material slot first. There we go. And assign it to those elements. And then we go back to our practical, bricks, add material. It's a little bit messed up. That's all right. We can go to U to unwrap. Basically, we are still using the projection mapping from our photo, so we want to just do a smart UV project now. That didn't quite change much. Maybe just a normal unwrap. So it seems like it might just be something I can change with the material itself. So with brick bottle, we can look down here. We have scale. We should be able to change the size of the bricks. Let's see here. Cube projection, correct aspect. You're killing me, man. Why is this just straight lines? Scale, tile scale. There we go. So we want more tiles. And I want them oriented in the other direction. If I go to my UV editor and I look at my tile image, I'm not able to because there is no tile image. It's a procedural material. So this gets tricky if you don't know your shader editors, but if you do, we can see the material here, and we can investigate a little bit further by clicking there and seeing how this is set up. Go somewhere earlier on, we see we have a Voronoi texture, noise texture. You know, this is at times where it's good to have different plugins, because for the sake of the stream, I'm going to go over to Blender Kit, search for a brick, and that's already closer to what we need. And I'll just slap it onto those faces, and we just replace that material slot with that material. It can be that easy. Sometimes you just gotta switch it up. We'll change the scale here. So it looks like if we put 10 and 10, should be good. All right. And then we'll choose our material for the marquee. And tab back into that. Select all our faces here. And I'll worry about those inset ones later. And just to pick another little quick one, I think we can go back to practical and select something out of basics again. Or something out of, if you go to just for real-time materials, that plugin, if you just go back to surfaces, it's just different surface conditions and they all come in the black color. We can select surface 2, add that material. It just has a little bit of detail into it, and then we can just turn it into like a light white gray. No color. And no color. There we go. Add another slot right here. For that, we can add a glass. So we go for this one, I'm going to go Blender Kit, Materials. We can specifically say window. Okay, not, well, interesting. I'm just looking for the window glass, but we can get an entire facade here. This might actually, let's go with that as well. So if I set that right there for window glass, tab back into the object and assign it to that piece right there. I think we don't actually have a trim up there. We might, we're not sure. It's covered by vegetation. Anywho, in order for it to connect to the building above, I'm just going to make this brick. And I can just select these faces that I want to change to brick, select the brick face, hit Shift G, and oh no, that's select material. So that's the wrong shortcut. I'll just go ahead and assign brick. But what I was saying there is you could actually, in this edit mode, hit Shift G and you can select similar. You can select material and that'll help you just select everything that's the same material at once. So neat little trick to know. The UV editor for this one needs to be the same as the others. So we'll go ahead and do a smart UV project, or we'll again select everything with that same material. If we need to edit the UV so they're all the same, smart UV project. Now they're all looking too small, so I can just tweak the number here to 5 or 1. No, 5, 4, 4. Okay. Not bad. We've got one building condition. Now the cool thing about this is we only have maybe like 24 faces on this object. But again, if I were to make a whole street line with this, right, it's really only one object arrayed several times. And since I did a 10 by 10 cube, or if you're consistent with how you set up your cubes, you could even alternate between this and a different design. Say I wanted to do the ivies onto this object. Well, there's ways to do that as well. There is the Ivy Gen plugin. I have so many plugins here, it's hard to find. We have the Ivy Generator plugin right there. It'll be under the Create section. So I can open that up to add a new ivy. But in order to add a new ivy, I actually need to be in edit mode and select where I want the ivy to generate. So you see here, it's growing from the top and coming down. So I'll actually just select these faces over here, right? And then hit Shift right click above the window so that my 3D cursor moves over there. That's where we're going to get our ivy to build out. And let's see, what happened to my ivy? Apparently it goes away when you get out of edit mode. So we must have to do it from the outside. So just by selecting the object, right, just selecting the object and just setting the 3D cursor, we can generate an ivy on this face originating from where we place the 3D cursor. So we can hit add new ivy and we see there it's kind of behaving a little bit weird. It's trying to grow upwards, right? We want it to grow downwards. So we can look over here into the settings, branch size, branch probability, adhesion weight. So we can turn up the adhesion weight and have it stick closer to the actual building so we can see what that looks like after tweaking it. So that looks good. Undo that, tweak it a little bit more. So ivy size, we can tone it, we can tone the leaf size a little bit down. So here we have 0.02, we'll do 0.01, just see that at half size. You want to preview it every time you change it. You don't want to make too many changes and then have it look completely wrong and not really know why. And the thing is happening here is I have it growing on the top, but I only want it to grow to the front. So because I have my 3D cursor there, I can actually bring a plane in that will have an origin right there. I can scale it down, move it locked into some axes so I can keep it on that face right there. And I can set this face to actually be the object that I build the ivy on. And I can just limit it to where I want it to grow. And it's flat onto the building right there. I don't have to worry about it. So I have my same settings. I select that plane, hit add new ivy. We see they're growing at the top. So I'll just bring it down here. And I think actually one thing we might want to do with our object is add some subdivisions, because it uses the points all over this surface to generate the ivy. So we want to have more points in order to generate it on. And also we want to apply all our transformations just so that our object data is just right for the ivy to generate on. Max ivy size. So I think my units may just be off. So if I were to take everything in my scene, just make everything bigger, including the camera, so that if I go back into the camera view, it's still locked in with the geometry. I don't have to tweak too much of the ivy because I don't want to mess up the settings either by doing too much. So, you know, it's doing actual ivy size. Oh, I see what I did. It looks like nope, there we go. Okay, add new ivy. There we are. So it's a little bit harder to see now that it's a bit smaller, but we can now actually just increase with its max size, select a different spot to have it grow from. And we're generating a bit more ivy. I had brought down the leaf size, so we'll bring that back up. We'll generate a bit more. There we go. Just move the 3D cursor around and start generating some more of these. And we can take just the leaves and hit Alt-D to duplicate, rotate on the axis that you should. So we'll set the origin to the geometry so we can rotate it outward a little bit. Just use some copies over here around. Also, we could select the, go back to selecting the other object and generate it on the windowsill here, on the window frame, so we can hide some of that. Okay, now we can select all our ivy objects over here on the right-hand side, including our cube, and we can hit Control. Well, before we hit Control J, we want to set a material for these before we add that over. So we can actually select all our ivy curves here, which don't include the leaves. We can add a material. So if you actually go to Blender Kit has ivy material. If it, there we go, works with me. We have different ivy leaves, and then we also have the branches themselves. So we're going to go ahead and select the branches for this one. There we go, ivy stem, Control L, link materials. We have some stems, and then we find all our leaves, which are all embedded within our stems. So I'm just going to go ahead and select them this way. Ooh. Deselect the wrong things. There we go. And we can select one of these leaves. So yeah, we can go a bit darker and then maybe mess with that. Control L to link materials on all those objects. And if we now go to our material preview, we see we have some ivy on that. We can delete that helping surface. And again, we just select all these on the right hand side. Control J to join them all together. Now they're just one object. And I can copy that over. Ooh. We're missing our leaves. There we go. Select all our curves, Control J. And then all our leaves get out. We join those together. Great. So now we have one object for the stems and one object for all the leaves.
duplicate that, stretch it a little bit so it looks sort of different. Or we can also place that in array. We can have it happen more frequently. There we go. So very quickly, we can come up with a little module. And obviously, if now I take the same method and could even take a duplicate of this one, rotated by 90 in the z-axis, or in my case, 270 degrees. Obviously, I will be more diligent with the way I build out this corner, but essentially to build out a corner for this building, I just have to cleanly merge these two together and then build out this little corner piece. So I bring these two objects, just copy them over. I can now bring them into my scene. We see there the scale that they have. If I go to my camera view, or side view rather, hone in on where my buildings are right here and the vehicle. Place that right there. There we are. Back to camera view. We roll back to where these buildings pop in. And we have our background element start to come together. If I join these two, I'm going to need to get rid of the array on one of them. Move this over here. Now I'm just continuing to mock this up. But if I join these two objects, I can then also duplicate the array and do in the z-axis. Not like that. Like this one down here, and set the opposite ones, and I can start stacking them up. So it's as simple as creating another little module that doesn't have this one, but you can see how very quickly these arrays can stack together to make a whole building. That's a little much. And we're basically working off of a photo to derive the environment inspired by these different scenes that we can pull in and start making these little modules. So for example, if I were to just do one more, so I can get an arcade going, and we'll end it there with a second story. So if you'd like to ask any questions at this time, I'll be paying special attention to the chat. If you have any suggestions on the process or any questions, now's the time. So to do this piece right here, I want to set that block with no array. And I want to go over back into the object properties. And just as before, I'm going to set this into wireframe. And in wireframe, I can now go into edit mode with tab and start selecting these loops. Just kind of I'm going to try and rely on the same cut geometry that I have from before. So I can select these loop cuts here and just slide them over to make my arcade right there. Oh, I want to be in wireframe mode when I do this, actually. When I do the selection. So I can select through the object and then switch back over into preview mode. Material preview. Okay. Now to get that arch, it's actually pretty simple. I'm going to first switch this back to textured, and just as I did before, I'm going to snap those faces back flat. There we are. And I'll actually shift right click to put the origin right there. Select a cylinder mesh, rotate it 90 degrees. Make sure I'm aligned to center. So I'll go back to material preview, set both of these objects to wireframe. And I can line up this sphere right here to become my arch. It's not a perfect cylinder, the arch, obviously. Oops. So I can just stretch it in whatever axis I need to. Actually, it fits pretty great. I'm just gonna go ahead and say it is a perfect cylinder. Okay, just have it fit right there. Go to my solid view, make sure that this is pushing out. And just like we did before, we're gonna do a Boolean, but this time it's gonna be a Boolean difference. I'll go to textured, select this model, Boolean, difference, yes. I do want to first subdivide the cylinder so I don't get all that edge. So I can make it very round with some subdivisions. Or was it a bevel? No, it's subdivisions. I could also, what I should have done is just when you create a cylinder, you want to just go over here to the settings and add more vertices. So we can see with less vertices, it even becomes a cube again, or a triangle, or an octagon, whatever you want. And if we add faces, I'll go ahead and add not too many. I don't want to bloat up the scene, but you can add 60 faces all around. Now we rotate that. I have to reposition. So I'm actually just going to have it fit as it did before between these two lines at the top, perfect circle. Select right here. I've got one more step. Sorry. I'm going to edit mode here. And I also want to even out this face here. There we go. So now we can do Boolean difference. Select the cylinder. Make it fast. Sometimes when it's set to exact, it just makes the original geometry disappear. So if you set it to fast, that typically fixes it. Doesn't seem like it's cutting correctly though. There is another cool, neat plugin that I've worked with called Box Cutter. So Box Cutter makes life real easy for Boolean operations. We can activate it by hitting Alt W. We can select a circle right here, and then we just select a mode for modeling. So I want to cut into the object. No, I actually want to, I suppose it is cut. What is this one? Extract. Let's say it is cut. So I can just start drawing out a circle from its center. Let's do that again. Set that over to the size. Let's try that one more time. Oh, I can also do it from a corner. That's going to be easier. So if I shift click, I can start from a corner. So if I go from there, much easier to match the circle and the edges right here. Now if I switch my view, you see I'm now extruding the circle inward, and I can, set it as deep as I need to, so I can do it all the way through. And that should have cut into my object, but it did not. Let's undo the Boolean. And possibly, start with a fresh cube. So I can select this cube and then select the one below and hit Control L, transfer mesh data. Come on now. Control L, copy vmaps. Object transform, auto transform. I don't think it's able to. I've had this before where I'm able to just turn one object to have the same bounds as a similar object, but we'll go ahead and do this the old school way. We'll select these faces here, go have our vertex snap on, move this on the x-axis, and then if we turn off our array for the bottom, we can just have the single cube right there. And we can modify this one here to meet up with the bottom cube. So there we go. We just project to one of these edges with our snapping on. You can snap to the top of the cube right here. And then whatever height we need is determined by our photo. So we bring this up. So this second level is actually higher, or we'll have a bit of structure here underneath, but that's fine. We can bring this up and then set this object to wire. And I'm going to go ahead and speed build through this very quickly. I'm going to start with my Boolean. I'm going to go ahead and actually use that plugin we were looking at, Box Cutter, with this simple cube right here. I have to set this back to wire. Select this corner up here. Hold shift so it builds out the circle just like that. Nice. If I rotate around, I can set it to go all the way through. And this time we have a successful punch. There we go. And we already have some lines to work with. Well, it adds it in as a modifier, but if we just hit apply, now if I go into edit mode, I actually have these edges to mess with. So I'm just going to set a Control R to set a loop cut. It's not letting me put a loop cut where I want one. It allows me to do any face but the one that I have selected. I'm trying to cut from the bottom towards the top. But both of these faces now seem sort of unusable. We can use the knife to select that edge right there. And we can, before we do that, we can set this to edge perpendicular for the snapping, so that when I do my knife cut, well, it's snapping to the middle. Let's go to the front view. Knife. And cut down. There we go. And hit enter. Now we've cut that face in. And actually, an even easier way to go about this would be to do, could have done it from the beginning, but that's all right. We can just, actually, let's go ahead and do that. Since it'll be easier to just work on one side, because we want to get the same result on one side that we have on the other. Before we did that cut, we can just add in a loop cut right here in between the two spots. Go to the side view, delete everything on this side. So we have a half cube, but we can just set that to mirror itself. And we can start cutting into it that way. So if I go over to my front and I go to my box cutter operation right here, and I click and drag once again with the photo present, so I can get my circle. Yeah, see, things aren't lining up correctly for this arch. I think using the photo is actually messing me up more in this scenario than it should. So we'll go ahead and undo that mirror. We're going to set this back into textured mode. And we're just going to go ahead and do the cylinder method. And I'm just going to take artistic license on it. Now that I have my photo reference, and I know I can just use that as reference, you know, by like size and spread and whatnot. I know that I have that sort of centered. And we can do the full arch this time around. I'm going to go into wireframe mode here, tab in, select half the circle, and then actually just move that down so it hits just like that. Select this one, Boolean modifier, difference with this one, and there we are. Trying to use these fancy plugins, these different methods, but we have an archway. We're really just gonna use this photo as reference at this point. I can move this face over. Don't worry about the arch going away. It's just still a modifier. We'll do face project on a snapping, and there we go. Tab back in. We have our arch. I'm only going to... That's all the detail that I really need to add on that. Because if I go to my material preview and then get these bars, in order to get this balcony with the bougainvilleas, it can be real simple. I can just add in a plane, 90-degree rotate, make it fit right up, turn off my snapping. There we go. Stretch that through. Set the material from the photo on top of it, so it serves as a guide for modeling it. So that's our building 1 material. Tab, go to our perspective. Oh, well, that won't work, of course. I have to move all this stuff back so that it is where it should be. Right there. And hit tab on that face. This one right here. Just finish positioning that. Tab A, U, project from view. Now if I go back to my side view and I go to material preview, seems like it's gone, but it's actually just has that on top of it now. I can add a new cube here, or a new plane rather. Make that fit the size right there. RX90. Bring that in over on a corner. Well, I'll copy one of these. So tab into it. This is a real simple inset faces right here. I can just inset those more or less right there. Go into a side view. At this point, you know, just taking some artistic license here. And if we take a look again at our reference plane, move it further back a little bit. There's a little bit of a border here. So I'm just going to hit tab again with edge mode, alt click to select the boundary faces right here. And I can hit extrude, escape, so that they snap on, and then scale to just move it out like that a little bit. And then maybe have some fun with it again, extrude. Well, now I'm adding a lot more faces, but that's okay. Just to add a little bit of trim right there. Cool. So moving that over into the corner, we can now set up an array. Or rather in the other corner. So if we go to, we are in material preview. Let's bring all, whoa. That's a box cutter still going at it. Let's bring back our model. And let's move all this stuff out. Oh, come on now. There we go. Move all this stuff forward. so that if we go into material preview, we can see that. Overlay the top of it. We want to set this one back to wireframe. We can move this over. And then front. Wait. What happened to my did I leave it behind? Yep. I moved the cylinder forward and I didn't move all this other stuff forward. So I should just apply the boolean here so that I can delete the cylinder out. I'm going to set this over here, apply. So I still want it in wireframe just so I can reference this back image right here. So I see my arch line right there, and I can set up an array here of 3. Then have it duplicated to set up an array downwards with a -1 at the Z and 0 elsewhere. How is that the Z-axis? All right, Y-axis. There we go. And we just had a row of 3 as well, right? It's just a square. If we go back, you can see right there. I'm going to move it just so it's right in front of the arch. That's fine right there. I also want to punch out that face. So select face mode and edit mode, delete only faces. There we go. It's actually row 4. And by hitting Alt D, I can now just start copying this. So I can move it with G and set my snapping to vertex mode. So I can rotate that and snap that there. Rotate RZ90. So we have that rotating, and I can set it up for the other side. It should be a little bit better at knowing where I want to move it. I'm going to turn that off. Just have it sandwiched right there. And we still have our modifiers. So I can continue to add to this row inward. I can select these two. Well, I can apply their arrays. And before I do that, I do want to keep just that module on its own. But if I apply the arrays on these two, oh, I have to apply the second one first. Okay. And there we go. I can now Control J to select these two. I now made myself a little corner module. I can set a mirror modifier and have it set to mirror with the arcade. So if I now bring the arcade back from wireframe, right here, textured, hide my cylinder, go back to the front view. I can now start matching textures. So the arcade, I just want to have the brick, so I can just select down there, and or even just select, not even linking because I have too many materials on that bottom there. I can just select the arcade, go over to materials. I don't have that many. I can find my bricks. I gotta rotate how they're showing up here, but I don't want to edit that through the material because it's showing correctly down on this material. So what I want to do is go to UV editing for that arch. Here I see the arch. I can hit A to see the entire arch. And now I know if I switch over to material preview, I just need to rotate 90. I can rotate it 180 again just to have it be straightforward. And I can increase the size of this UV so it matches what we have going on in the bottom. There we go. And I can also just reuse my, what was it called? Surface 2 material on this one right here, just to add some detail onto it. And again, now we have these different ones. I could even copy this arcade and put it down here. Snap to vertex. Okay. I can also, since this is now a unique one, snap that, make it lower. Select these two objects, Control J. Oh, apply the mirror before you join two objects. But even though these two have different materials, I can also select them both and hit Control J. And it only changed the material on the inside, which is a little strange. It shouldn't have done that. I can use my selection brush with C to select this whole arcade. And go to my materials and set that back to brick. These two did not unwrap properly. So I can do U, unwrap, there we go. And now I can, same thing, fix this geometry's UV. This is real building basics, basic blocks, building blocks, basic building blocks for this environment. I can start throwing IVs over the top of it as well. If I take away the modifiers, the array that I set up on this IV, and I just bring this over. Let's turn off my object snapping. Let's bring it over onto this face right here. Come on now. GY. I can do some copies. Some mirroring. Just to make it a little different. Okay. I can select those, select the block, hit Control J. So now those are joined as well. So this is now all one object with all the materials that I need. And again, I can do arrays with this whole object. So if I set the factor to 1. Oh, I see. I accidentally joined these things up here, which I did not want to do. Let's go ahead and delete all that out. Part of the IV gone haywire. Oh, I was, I had my array hidden. So there we go. Our array is back. I can bring it back to 1.1. And because I used the same size, should I use the same size on this one as the other one, all it takes is setting a distance of 1. Although it doesn't, because there's clearly something else in this object I didn't mean to join in. Just give me 1 second here. Oh, our origin point is actually all out of whack. So, what is this? Is it working properly now? 1, 5. It's the origin point. So we see the origin point for that cube shifted over. We can set over to object, set origin, origin, center to mass. And now if we set 1. Nope, it's still skipping further than it should be. Anywho, I'll just use a factor here. I'll troubleshoot that later, but for now, just to make things line up nice and well, we can use 0.4 to have them stick together, or we can use 0.8, 0.85 to have this in-between arch show up. And same thing up here, since I joined it with a balcony, I can array this one as well and have this continue on as a second story of the building. Building out the roof would be a similar process. I can actually just work off of this face, Shift D, and rather than scaling it up, I'd want to select this edge, move it outward, this edge, and move it outward. I was actually supposed to select these faces that are separated and do right click, separate by selection. So now I'm working on the roof independently. I can extrude these faces up. Oop, extrude them in the Z-axis. There we are. Select the boundary edges. Shift them down. Looks like I have my, just these. There we go. Shift those down. I can make this any other material I'd need, but I'm just going to link it over to the material I have for this one. Control L. Link materials. There we are. Do an unwrap real quick. And we had those little beams right here. So we want to start adding in those as well. Just add in a cube. Scale it down. Have it push outward. We can add in that little curve on the edge by using the bevel tool. We can just select that edge right there. And with the bevel tool, we can add this situation. Now we're only getting one face, so we can edit that by changing the segments up here. So let's say we want to add 6 edges or segments. There we go. Nice little curve. Array. Add in some spacing. All right, let's get that looking nice and even. So we want to apply that array and then join to our main piece. Now the material there got absorbed. So something we can do to fight against that is go over here on the material slot, actually create a material slot with that surface material. So that when we join, it keeps that material slot over. Oh, but that's part of the, I added that as part of the, right. I did it with the roof, but I should have added it as just part of this main block, which I did. Because the corner actually for the roof shouldn't have this bit right here. It seems like well, this would be a corner piece because we have this sticking out. That's why we're getting this spacing over here. So actually we wouldn't want to array this roof piece, but we'd want to actually just have it on one side so it can continue on. And just select this face and push it in. Having it snap to the index, to the vertex. There we go. It's a quick fix. And that could be what gets arrayed over and over. Snap that piece and snap this piece. There we are. Rather than having this two with an array, just copy this one over and start the array one piece shifted. Trying to snap to the one right here. There we go. And we can do the same thing for this one. Just sort of play with it. Set an array. Actually, we'll just have these sit right next to each other. And then we could set an array from this one, or even just a mirror at this point. But in any case, I now have the building blocks to just start generating as much building as I need. And I can do this with a few buildings. So I have different options. I can texture them different. I can have them arrayed differently. Oh, this thing was rendering in the background this entire time. We paste in our new buildings. Cool. We have that whole setup. I can also just, now that I brought this one in, you know, I have the original that I can edit in this original file. But now that I brought in this whole array, I can start just applying all the arrays to these different entities so that the effort can scale. What I mean by that is by now applying all these arrays, oops, didn't mean to create one just yet. Apply the Boolean. Okay, we still have an array. Nope, no we don't. Just have a Boolean going nowhere. So now that we have all these different parts with no arrays, I can hit Control J. Now this is all one piece. Just kidding. Now that I really did select all of them, it's all one piece. I had a material mess up there because some material in here doesn't have, some object here doesn't have a material slot. But anywho, we'll finish out just by putting these all into one set. And I can set this up in an array. And as you could see very easily and without much taxing resources to the computer, because everything's generally low poly, we should really have this face the other way. Since everything's low poly, it's pretty efficient on the computer, even when creating different arrays of the same object. I move this down to meet the car. Maybe I want that piece. Where'd it go? No. Maybe I want that piece to start up closer to the water, and I can have the array follow through quite a few times. And so from the camera view and in sequence, we can have these buildings flying by, or the car flying by all these buildings. And that's just one element. That's one layer. Can you manipulate any UV on any surface? Yep, the answer is yes. We actually take a look at this file. We go into material preview. These are some AI generated images that were projected onto these buildings. It's taking a little bit to load, but if we go to UV editing, we can actually see that all these buildings are actually being applied from this image. So it actually, the UVs are projected from a perspective to match onto this image. So any image, you can UV unwrap and edit all those points. If I were to just select one face of this building, like say this one, I get the four corners of that face of the building on the right, and I can see them here. And I'm going to actually retrofit that building to fit a shape a bit more accurately. So you see it didn't even like pick up parts of the building, although it's trying to do something a bit more interesting than the image lends itself for. That's okay. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be quite a mission to get all these elements modeled out. But I think once I have those modules, those building blocks in place, all done from photo reference, I can very quickly join all up these buildings all up together and have my foreground elements. For my above ground elements, I'm actually going to rely on pre-made models and modify on top of them rather than starting from a photo, because I'm using all this inspiration from my photography in Italy to inspire the city that it's in. But being that it's dystopic, I want to start using some of these other elements, such as architecture made from this, to meet up closer with what we have going on here. Having some towers generated by just stacked up containers and bridges being formed and all this stuff happening above this stuff. And to bring those two worlds together. Okay, so that's going to be it for wrapping up the stream. If you have any other questions you'd like to give me in the chat, now would be the time. I'm going to switch over to my face just to say thanks for hanging out. Thanks for tuning in. Some very instructional process there, and some other parts that was just kind of me working through the modeling a little bit. But
hopefully you kind of realize that for making these background elements, it can add in a lot for a scene, but you don't have to spend that much time on it. And just working from photos, you can get something pretty decent that serves as good reference, especially for ArcViz, right? If you're doing architectural renderings or rendering of any proposed design in a location, you can quickly take photos of the space, bring that into Blender, and just kind of have that mocked up so you can place your project in there. Appreciate it, Twin Lab. Thanks for tuning in. Love the question. Love the support. Trying to get this out more here, and I wish I could be faster, be more productive on the stream, but the reality is for some of the modeling, it's just a bit tedious and getting it right to the photo. And I'm trying to make sure that I'm able to put in some tips in there as part of the modeling and get to texturing as quickly as I can, get to linking these things together as quick as I can, so I can go through a bit more with you. But I'm going to work on these buildings on my own now, get this full floor generated, and for next time, we'll be doing something similar, but generating those dystopic pieces at the very top that we were just talking about. So now that we worked out what's going to happen at the street level down here, the old historic, we'll start doing some more sci-fi stuff that's going to sit above it on the next stream. So by then, I hope to have some more of these built out and placed into the scene. So thanks for tuning in. Consider sharing the stream to anybody who might like it. I post on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram whenever I go on live. And yeah, look out for those. You can turn on post notifications for the channel, and you'll know when I go live. But yeah, any Tuesdays and Wednesdays, consistently 8 p.m. Other days, afternoons, I kind of post when I'm about to go. So that's how it is. See y'all on the next one. Hope y'all have a great evening. Make some funky stuff.